Hi there, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to be talking about tier set bonuses for tanks in patch 10.1. Blizzard revealed all of the tier set bonuses for patch 10.1 a couple of days ago, and now that we've gotten the chance to test some, but not all of them on the PTR, it's pretty clear that there are some that are really good and some that are really bad, so I kind of want to go over those now in this video. Now, they started off with a bit of a philosophy, which was something that they said even during the beta, and, I think everybody kind of understood. The Season 1 tier set bonuses were, for the most part, pretty unimpactful. Either they were, just relatively undertuned compared to previous tier set bonuses, 4 or 5% damage increases, or things like the Blood DK set where it's basically all passive. It does give you a bunch of resources, and it's pretty nice, but it doesn't really have a direct impact on your rotation. You're not changing the way that you hit your skills based on having the tier set bonus. It's just like, imagine it gave you 25% more haste or whatever. Good, but not complex or difficult to manage, which is great. Now that we've had a bit more of a opportunity to get comfortable with the massive redesign that they did to basically every spec in the game with the addition of the new talent system, we can get some talent, or we can get some tier set bonuses that are a little bit more complicated than the last round of them. So let's just start with Blood DK. Blood DK's two-piece bonus is that Heartstrike and Blood Boil deal 20% more damage, which is good. Blood DK does have a serious damage issue. They do not do enough damage, and they definitely don't do enough damage at AoE, so both of those help a lot. And they also have a 10% chance to grant Vampiric Blood for 5 seconds. That's great. That's a pretty significant uptime increase to a talent that is, or a defensive cooldown that is really quite strong. And given how often you cast these, that really does add up to a lot more uptime on Vampiric Blood, especially considering that you can talent into talents like Red Thirst and improve Vampiric Blood and Umbilicus Saturnus and really get high uptime on baseline Vampiric Blood, which with improved Vampiric Blood gives you 30% more health and 40% more healing intake. And while this two-piece bonus doesn't benefit from Umbilicus Saturnus, this massive shield based off of your Blood Plague damage, it does still benefit from improved Vampiric Blood, so it is still like quite a valuable defensive cooldown whenever it procs. Now, it's a little weird, though, the idea of getting procs maybe during a taunt swap or when you're not actively tanking, or even just when you're tanking something that isn't that dangerous. Maybe a little annoying, something I've always disliked as a tank, just getting random defensive bonuses when you don't necessarily want them, kind of annoying. And the 4-piece bonus makes that a lot more palatable by giving you Vampiric Strength as well. Now, this is phrased a little weirdly. It says when you would gain Vampiric Blood, you are infused with Vampiric Strength. It sort of sounds like it happens instead, but having gotten to test this tier set bonus, it happens in addition to it. So when you gain Vampiric Blood, rather than when you would, you are also infused with Vampiric Strength, granting you 10% strength for 5 seconds. Your Heartstrike and Blood Boil, which obviously benefit up here, are now also benefiting down here, extend the duration of Vampiric Strength by 0.5 seconds. So you can't maintain it indefinitely, but you can get, 7 seconds, 6 or 7 seconds or so every proc. This makes using Vampiric Blood into an offensive cooldown, so it makes Red Thirst very valuable. And then, because of the value of the 2-piece bonus, you probably are going to want to take improved Vampiric Blood and 2 points in Red Thirst, I would think, in every build. And then, since you're doing that, you're probably going to also run Umbilicus Saturnus just because it's so much defensive value. I mean, it depends. If you're tanking something that's not that challenging, you wouldn't necessarily need it. But obviously, this is pretty good. And it's good for both Mythic Plus and rating. I think that's something that maybe is missed in some of these other tier set bonuses. This is a good all-purpose Mythic Plus and raid set bonus. And that's really, really good for Blood DKs because they've been great tanks in the first tier, but they've been a little bit mid in Mythic Plus in the first season. Not bad, just mid. I think this sets them up for sustained success into the next tier and next season of Mythic Plus. Now let's move on to Demon Hunter, and Demon Hunter is a little disappointing by comparison. Now, we aren't actually able to test the Vengeance set yet. I did try to do that, and I believe the tier set bonuses just read set. It was very strange. There were also some visual bugs. I do have some video of this, so I'll throw that in. But basically, my character just had like a floating head and then like no neck, no torso, no legs. If I try to look down inside through her torso at her pants, there was just nothing in there. It was a very strange visual bug. I've never seen anything like it. I thought it was very funny, but I've never seen anything like it. So the 2-set bonus for Vengeance Demon Hunter makes soul fragments heal for 10% more, which is good. I mean, that's a good defensive gain. You know, it roughly amounts to not quite 10% more healing, but like 6 to 8% more total healing, which is pretty good. And generating a soul fragment, which is a little different from how this usually works with Vengeance. Usually it's when you consume one, but whatever. Generating a soul fragment increases your fire damage by 2% for 6 seconds. Multiple applications may overlap. This is always the way things work with Vengeance Demon Hunter, right? You get very small, kind of crappy bonuses, but it stacks a billion times, and then because of that, it can be good. In general, you're going to be generating about 40 soul fragments in single target and 50 to 60 in AoE, probably more like 50, just to be conservative. Which means that you're going to be rolling about 4 stacks of this bonus all the time in single target, so about 8% more fire damage in single target, and then about 5 stacks of this in AoE, so, 10% more fire damage in AoE. Some of the early sims for this indicate that it's only about a 2 or 3% damage increase in single target, which is actually kind of underwhelming, but it's about a 9% damage increase in AoE, which is pretty good. So I think that this 2-piece bonus, certainly when you compare it to the like 4 to 5% damage increases that you were getting out of 2-piece bonuses from last tier set, it's pretty good in AoE, it's pretty good in Mythic Plus, and Demon Hunters have not been great in Mythic Plus, but they also haven't been great in Raid. I think they're a little underappreciated by the community, to be honest, but that being said, they're still not that popular, so they probably could use a little bit more love than they're getting out of this bonus, which is kind of inconsistent between AoE and single target, basically Mythic Plus and Raid. Good in Mythic Plus, not good in Raid. The 4-set bonus makes Shear and Fracture, which you never really use Shear, you always use Fracture, but either way it makes it deal fire damage. So instead of dealing physical damage and being mitigated by armor, it deals spell damage, and then it benefits from your passive magic damage increase that you have as a Demon Hunter for everyone. It also just deals more damage because it's not getting 30% or 25% of its damage shaved away by armor. So that's good, but it's not enormous. It is basically just a single target filler skill that's getting more damage. Great, but not crazy. After consuming 20 soul fragments, so about 2 times a minute in single target and about 2.5 times in AoE, your next Shear or Fracture applies Fiery Brand to the target for 6 seconds. Now, the Demon Hunter community is generally very negative on this bonus. They really don't like it, and I understand why for AoE. Mythic Plus players really like a Fiery Brand spreading build right now, and that has problems when you have multiple Fiery Brands out at the same time of just kind of bricking and no longer spreading, no longer working. And the idea that this would come in and contribute to that sounds pretty bad. It sounds pretty alarming. I'm inclined to agree with them that this probably wouldn't work with that Fiery Brand spreading build, which is not great for Mythic Plus, especially considering that the 2-piece kind of is a lot better for Mythic Plus than it is for Raid. To have this 4-piece, which is very clearly only good in Raid. I do think it's okay in Raid, though. It's a single target damage increase, not a huge one, a little undertuned, but basically 12 seconds of Fiery Brand uptime in single target is not bad. It's a little unfortunate that it's so uncontrolled. Maybe if it was a full 10 seconds of Fiery Brand uptime to compensate for the fact that it is uncontrollable, that would be pretty interesting. Getting 20 seconds out of every minute of uptime of Fiery Brand and then also having other defensive cooldowns to layer in there, I think would be really strong. In AoE and in Mythic Plus, this 4-piece bonus just feels really misguided. Yeah, I'm sort of down on this tier set bonus. I've seen some Demon Hunters saying it's the absolute worst of all the tanks. I don't think so, but it's definitely down there. It's low on the list. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to the Guardian Druid set. I like this set in general. I think this is one of the better ones that we have available to us. I do not care for this one particular line in the 2-piece bonus here. When you take damage, Mangle and Thrash damage and Rage Generation are increased by 15% for 8 seconds. I think if that aspect of it was removed, having to take damage in order to do more damage and generate more rage, I think I would like this set quite a lot more. It makes it so that, you know, basically this aspect, this pretty significant damage and rage generation increase from the 2-piece just goes away whenever you're not actively tanking, which is pretty irritating in raids, especially with how weak cat weaving is at this point in the expansion. Unless they're going to make some really significant changes to the Guardian Druid tree to make cat weaving a more appealing option, this is just sort of like a punishment for playing Druid, as though playing Bear Druid wasn't punishment enough. Healing for 6% of all damage taken over 8 seconds is pretty interesting. I think that heal back probably could be shorter. Effectively, as long as you don't get bursted down, healing back for a percentage of damage taken is roughly equivalent to just having damage reduction. I would like for this window to be a little shorter. I wouldn't mind if this window was a little, or this amount was a little larger too, but hey, you know, not bad, and definitely like a good all-purpose concept of, you know, getting some pseudo damage reduction and then also some damage output. Now, the 4-piece bonus is a lot more straightforward than the 2-piece. It makes it so that your Maul or Raise, if you're talented into it, just does 20% more damage, which is a pretty substantial single target damage increase if you're just running a standard Tooth and Claw Maul build. And if you are running Raise for like max AoE damage parsing, that is a fantastic damage increase. 20% more damage on your main AoE damage dealer. Huge. Awesome. It also makes it so that casting Iron Fur, which you use pretty often, or Maul/Raise, increases your max health by 3% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Now, even though this is triggered by Iron Fur, this doesn't work like Iron Fur where it rolls on and off. This is just a regular traditional buff that you stack up 5 times, and then you just maintain it by casting Iron Fur or Maul or Raise at least once every 12 seconds. Basically a super easy free maintenance buff. So, you know, the 4-piece for Bear Druid is 15% more max health. That's not like a perfect fix for Bear Druid's woes. You know, they are a little bit too vulnerable to spell damage. They are a little bit too vulnerable to bleeds. Basically anything that they can't mitigate with Iron Fur, they're a little bit too weak against compared to the other tanks. But getting 15% more health isn't a bad move. If Bear got some sort of other compensating buffs in their talent tree, like maybe another way to mitigate damage other than Bark Skin or Survival Instincts, it's like a larger cooldown, or even if they just cut the cooldown of Bark Skin a little bit further, or they just threw them another base 5, 10, 15% damage reduction or health or something, I think Bear Druid would be in great shape. Just a little bit more somewhere, maybe even in the form of this tier set bonus. Maybe they just bump that number up to 4%. I think you're cooking. I think Bear Druid will be in great shape then. All right, now let's move on to my favorite of the list by a huge margin, Brewmaster Monk. Brewmaster has a good 2-piece and a good 4-piece. The 2-piece is super basic. Your blackout kick damage is increased by 20%. That's just a straight damage increase to one of your, you know, basically your critical skill, the skill in your rotation that you want to hit on cooldown. You also have a 10% chance to not reset your elusive brawler stacks on a successful dodge. This is a little RNG. It does seem to me, like, especially when combined with this first part of the 4-piece, Rising Sun Kick grants a stack of elusive brawler, that Blizzard is trying to push monks toward more mastery stacking. And while mastery is not my favorite stat on monk, and the mastery stacking approach has never really appealed to me in terms of like being fun, the way that these bonuses work together, it makes it pretty appealing. You know, the 4-piece here says when you dodge, damage and critical strike chance of your next blackout kick or rising sun kick is increased by 5%, stacking up to 5 times. So you're getting some more like double or triple dipping or whatever on the value of mastery. You know, it's not only a defensive bonus, it's not only a defensive bonus that has a 10% chance to not reset, it also is increasing your damage and crit chance. on your Blackout Kick or Rising Sun Kick. It's also getting more value through Rising Sun Kick, and what an incredible bonus. Just from some of the raid testing that I did earlier today, I was getting 60% dodge chance on some of these bosses. I think I had a pull on one of the bosses where I had over 70% dodge chance. This combo of set bonuses interacts really nicely with each other. It interacts really well with the base kit. And Brewmaster's already a strong tank. This basically just ratchets everything that's good about the class up to 11. You'll love to see it. Prop Pally is next, and Prop Pally has, I think, my favorite of all the two-piece bonuses, even maybe better than Brewmaster Monk, I'm not sure. Certainly very appealing in AoE and in Mythic Plus in particular. Avenger's Shield puts a dot on all targets, making them take an extra 20% of the damage it dealt, and then it heals you for all the damage that it deals. That's awesome. I mean, it basically is just taking what I already love about Pally. They do a lot of AoE damage in Mythic Plus. They have a lot of value in Mythic Plus with the Avenger's Shield, you know, being a multi-purpose AoE threat tool, multi-target damage, great cleave skill, interrupt machine. And now it also not only does a bunch of damage and shields you thanks to your talents, it also heals you as well. That's great. And now for the downside, the 4-set bonus for Prop Pally is the worst in all of the 4-set bonuses, one of the worst tier set bonuses I've ever seen. Judgment critical strikes can trigger Grand Crusader. Now, if we look at the Prop Pally talents, Grand Crusader right here is a 15% chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Avenger's Shield. If you take Inspiring Vanguard, it also gives you 2% strength and it jumps up to 20% chance to proc. This 4-piece bonus is an interesting concept. I like the idea of judgments triggering Grand Crusader. I think that's a really cool idea. The problem here is that the line says judgment critical strikes can trigger Grand Crusader, and I have been able to test this. I was going literally whole minutes at a time between triggering Grand Crusader with Judgment because you have multiple layers of RNG fighting against you here. You have to crit with Judgment, which, depending on your crit chance and your buffs, because you do get a crit chance increase if you're running Avenging Wrath Might, which you don't want to run that in Mythic Plus generally, but in Raid, if you're trying to parse, it can be a pretty good option, and it can boost your crit chance on Judgment a lot. But still, you might go 15 or 20 seconds between Judgment critical strikes on average, which means that you might be going 80 or 90 seconds between Grand Crusader procs. I mean, in a Mythic Plus setup or a progression raid setup where you're running Sentinel, so you're not getting any extra juice on your base crit chance and you're not running a lot of crit, you might go multiple minutes between triggering Grand Crusader procs off of Judgment critical strikes. That is the napkin math on like a 17% crit chance Judgment when you're casting Judgment every 4 seconds or so, which is a pretty reasonable assumption. That's the worst tier set bonus I've ever seen in my life. Grand Crusader procs aren't really even that valuable, so to only get one, maybe one a minute, maybe one every 2 minutes, awful, horrendous. I do think that there is something completely salvageable here, though. I think that the idea of making Judgment critical strikes just outright trigger Grand Crusader is okay. I think the idea of making Judgment without the critical strike aspect, just Judgment can trigger Grand Crusader, is pretty appealing. You know, if you're casting Judgment every 4 seconds, and let's say you're not talented into, what is it called? Inspiring Vanguard. So we're just talking 4 divided by 0.15. That's about a Grand Crusader proc every 25, 26 seconds. That's okay. Now, if we were to say you are talented into Inspiring Vanguard, that's more like a Grand Crusader proc around every 20 seconds. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty good. I would like this bonus if it just didn't have that one extra layer of RNG making everything suck, basically. All right, and now let's talk about Protection Warrior. We saved the worst for last. Now, I like an aspect of the 2-piece bonus. I think that Shield Slam providing 15% increased damage is really good. Just as a flat damage increase, 15% more Shield Slam damage, that's good. The problem is that's not great in Mythic Plus. You know, the majority of your damage in Mythic Plus, especially in larger AoE pulls, is going to be Thunderclap and Revenge. and neither of those are Shield Slam. It also reduces the cooldown of your last stand by half a second. Now, the rate at which you cast Shield Slam on average in raid in a pure single target, optimal for Shield Slam casting situation, this is only going to shave about 15 to 20 seconds of cooldown off of last stand at best. During last stand, the effects are doubled, so again, that's where the 20 seconds comes in. You're going to get maybe... Now, if you are running Bolster, and that's this talent over here on the right side of the right-hand tree, this cuts last stand's cooldown down from 180 seconds to 120, and it gives you 15 seconds of shield block when you cast last stand. Getting that effect available, every 100 seconds instead of 120 seconds is nice, but it doesn't really move the needle in terms of getting shield block uptime to be at 100%. It basically already is 100% now with the gear that we have, with the stat budgets that we have, and going above 100% uptime on shield block doesn't really do anything. So this may give you a little more leeway or make it a little easier, or just make it so that you can move some of your stat budget out of haste and into another stat like crit for more damage or versatility for more reliable defensive value. That is a possibility, but that's sort of like splitting hairs to try and make this defensive bonus seem a little more valuable than it is. Just hitting last stand on cooldown because it's a damage increasing talent now, thanks to doubling the effect of this Shield Slam damage increase, is kind of lame. It is what you should do under optimal conditions. You probably are going to hit last stand on cooldown. I mean, it's a damage increase. Why wouldn't you? And then we have the 4-piece, which unfortunately we haven't been able to test. There's not even any data mined spell data to look at to really know exactly how it works. But for 10 seconds after last stand ends, so last stand is about 100-second cooldown, maybe 90 seconds under really ideal conditions with really good Shield Slam resets, but still 10 seconds every, let's say, minute and a half to 100 seconds. Shield Slam will unleash a wave of force, dealing damage to enemies in front of you, and reduces the damage they deal to you by 5% for 5 seconds. So it gives you a 5% damage reduction effect as an AoE after last stand falls off. That's good. Getting defensive layers after a defensive cooldown falls off is always a good thing. Unleashes a wave of force dealing damage, literally no idea what it does. That could be hitting for the entire damage of a Shield Slam, seems very unlikely, but if that's the case, then I take it all back. This set bonus is awesome. If it's some flat amount of your attack power, like it's doing 10,000 damage as an AoE every minute and 40 seconds with every Shield Slam for a whopping 10 seconds, so maybe you get 30,000 damage as an AoE, terrible. One of the worst 4-pieces, actually maybe on par with the Prop Alley 4-piece in terms of badness. There's just no way to know until we're able to test it, but at this point I would say I'm not super hopeful. Now, Prop Warrior's been insanely strong up to this point in this expansion, just like I would say with Prop Alley and Mythic Plus. I think they've both been incredibly strong, some of the strongest Mythic Plus tanks that we've seen in a long time. So I don't necessarily see this as cause for alarm or cause for, re-rolling off of those two tanks, but I do see this as a deliberate way on Blizzard's end to probably throw a bit of a nerf at both of those classes. Now, I think that the Prop Pally 4-piece could be fixed to be a lot more consistent in proccing, even if it's a proc every 25 or 20 seconds or whatever. I think that's fine. A proc every 2 minutes is not. Similarly, I think this 4-piece for Warrior could be really pretty decent. If it adds quite a bit of AoE damage onto using last stand as an offensive cooldown, then I think that's justifiable. The whole thing will be justifiable if that's the case. If it's a piddly little bit of garbage damage, then I think it's going to be pretty hard to justify using this 4-piece over just using just better optimized pieces than the two suboptimal pieces. I don't know. I'm not that thrilled about this. I don't necessarily think it needs to be redesigned. Just the tuning on it definitely needs to make up for a design that is a little underwhelming. That being said, I think that Prot Pally and Prot Warrior are still both frontrunners to be two of the best tanks in the game in Mythic Plus in the upcoming season, and two really good raid tanks as well. If I had to rate them all, I would put Brewmaster Monk at the top. I think I would put Blood DK right below that. I would put Bear Druid and the 2-piece for Pally kind of in the middle, and then the 4-piece for Pally's way down at the bottom. Similarly, I think that Warrior is kind of down at the bottom, and Demon Hunter is hanging out down there with them as well. I'm not exactly sure which one I think is worst of all of those. Having done the napkin math, I feel like Prot Warrior is probably, if we're comparing the whole tier set bonus and thinking about Mythic Plus and Raid and all of it together, I think Warrior is probably the worst of them all, but Warrior is at least like a multi-purpose tier set. You know, Last Stand is good whether you're taking damage in Raid or taking damage in Mythic Plus. You know, if you're taking damage, Last Stand is good. The Demon Hunter tier set bonuses being like the 2-piece is good in one situation but bad in another, and the 4-piece is good in one situation and terrible in another. That's probably the worst tier set just because it's so mixed up, even though I think it is better in each situation than Prot Warrior is. Like overall, Prot Warrior is not actively sabotaging your talents like the Demon Hunter 4-piece is. Alright, so anyway, that's how I feel about the tier set bonuses that we've seen so far. Obviously, I'm really hoping for some changes to some of these, and just looking forward to testing them more as they're rolled out and iterated upon further. Thanks for watching. Bye.